Good morning everyone, or good morning to those that are in the Australia-New Zealand region. Good afternoon and or evening to those joining us from the US. Welcome to a OneStrand information session. Today's session is on things to consider during data conversion to S1000D. My name is Tammy Holter and I will be your host today, and I'll be joined by Ms. Rita Nye. Good morning, Rita.
Morning.
Today's session will run for approximately 45, maybe closer to 50 minutes, and that will leave us 10 or so minutes at the end for any questions that you may have. A little bit of a background on OneStrand, because some in the room haven't attended a session with us before. So OneStrand is the combination of a shared vision of two companies, being Absolute Data Group, or ADG, out of Brisbane, and AEC Inc. from the Oregon region. Under the OneStrand brand, our companies can provide our customers and partners with the most comprehensive set of solutions available for creating and managing your technical documentation and data. We offer cost-effective, user-friendly S1000D software solutions, and our comprehensive set of tools provide our customers with everything they need to simply manage the life cycle of their technical documentation. We offer over 30 years of experience in technical documentation services, combined with decades of experience developing our information management software applications. We work closely with regulatory agencies to deliver products and services that meet the stringent requirements of the defence and aerospace industries. And we earn our place each day with our customers and value our long-term relationships. OneStrand is more than a solution provider. We actually act as a stakeholder in your business. Just a few of the products in the R4I family. So these are probably the most common day-to-day used products, but we do have other products in the toolkit, and in fact Rita will give you a very short demonstration of a conversion tool component at the end, just to highlight one of those said tools. So the R4I CSDB is of course our common source database, and it's used to manage and publish critical content to things like IETP, HTML5 and other electronic delivery. We have R4I Writer, which is our powerful XML authoring tool optimised for the S1000D data formats, and that can be run connected to the CSDB for really awesome integration, drag and drop and lookup capability, but it's also available to be run as a personal edition without the CSDB. We have our R4I Viewer, which is our royalty-free online and offline capability IETM or IETP viewer. And R4I Binder is our powerful drag and drop tool, which you can drag and drop any data modules from the CSDB and build your book. That can be HTML, XML, doesn't have to be S1000D, can be a combination of MIL standard, ATA, legacy formats as well. That will create your PDF handbooks, so anything large, small, and of course can be customised with those to ensure that you can look like legacy formats and PDFs, even though you may be generating from S1000D content. Our IPD tool, or Illustrated Parts Data Manager tool, this is a massive time-saving tool that automatically generates hundreds of IPD data modules from your engineering or parts database or spreadsheet. And just a little note to indicate that we do have a hosted platform, so if you're not wanting to invest in software and install it and manage that software on your site yourself, visit shop.onestrand.com for the details of components in the R4I suite that are available to be utilised under a subscription service. It is. Okay, as I mentioned, your presenter today is Rita, and Rita is a senior consultant and she has 13 years experience in the IT industry, of which the last 9 she's been specialising in SGML and XML publishing systems analysis and development. She has a particular focus on dynamic database publishing projects, including delivery to web and complex print requirements. Rita is also a trainer as well as a senior consultant, and that's the reason she gets dragged into running a lot of the webinar and education sessions, using that consulting experience from out in the field and sharing that with our customers. Rita also has experience with other products, so other legacy programs such as Adobe FrameMaker, Arbortext Editor, but she does have a love for our own R4I writer tool. That's why internally it's known as Rita's Writer, because she loves it so much. And she's well known for her style sheet development in both XSLTs, but particularly complex XSLFO development. She loves that stuff.
Yeah, I'm totally crazy. I've lost it.
Okay. Well, welcome, Rita, and thank you for yet again presenting your depth of knowledge in the topics of anything related to S1000D. So I am going to hand over to you.
Fantastic.
And I believe you're kicking off with a survey by the looks of things this morning.
Okay, so first of all, what I'd like to do is actually run a survey and find out if anybody currently has a need to convert their legacy data.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a yes and no or a not sure. So it's just and that legacy data, it could be Word documents, PDF, SGML, ATA content. It doesn't matter what we're talking about. Do you need to convert it from what it currently is
to S1000?
To S1000D. So we're making an assumption here that you do want to be able to send it to S1000D.
Okay, so
if you could just click onto that and give us your indication, because that will just help us identify what's happening.
Okay, and so that's a choice of yes, no, or you're not sure at this point.
It's just you're here for information purposes only.
Oh, that's fast voting this morning.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay, everyone's on the ball today.
Oh, gee, and it even split down the middle as well. Okay, so let me close and share that with the audience there, Rita. So, yeah, not the mixed bag of yesterday.
No, okay, so it's 50% yes, 50% no.
Right, and no, not sure. Okay, well, everyone knows exactly what they're here for, which is great.
Okay, so what we're going to look at here or have a conversation about is the data conversion. Now, it doesn't matter what sort of conversion you're looking at. Again, remember, we're making the focus that the decision is you're converting to S1000D. But what you really need to be aware of is the most important part of this is the analysis stage. You do bad analysis, you're going to get a bad result. It's just that simple. So we need to make sure that when we start to look at this data conversion, we're looking at a range of the documents that you're going to produce. What are some of the samples? You want to have some simple samples. You want some complex samples. You want some in-detailed samples so that you can actually go through and do that full analysis so that you're aware of what you do need. We also then need to make sure that based on that conversion, what is the S1000D delivery requirement? So if you're converting content, you still need it to make it look like a PDF, and it's got to continue to look like the old style PDF presentation that you're currently working with. We need to have that understanding. We need to know where it's going to be. So we need to have that understanding of what do you need to be able to deliver to the end customer or for that delivery. And you also need to have a look at your business rules and your breaks. So I'm sorry, for those of you who haven't had a lot to do with S1000D, I'm going to start throwing all this wonderful jargon out. So if you jump up onto our website, you'll see we've run quite a lot of different webinars on S1000D.
Last 5 years?
Yes,
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
But with that, we do a lot of emphasis on business rules.
Yep.
Now, business rules aren't telling you how the business is to be run, but it's how you're going to implement the S1000D solution into the organisation and that project.
Mm-hmm.
So you really do need to have a good set of business rules. And with that, it then goes into your BREX, which is your Business Rules Exchange document. So you then need to be able to develop that. And you've really got a couple ways that can occur. Your customer can supply you with the business rules and the BREX.
Yep.
You can develop your own business rules and BREX, or it could be that you're merging your business rules and BREX and your customer's business rules and BREX into a combined set.
Mm-hmm. So we know that as a layered BREX, right?
Yep.
Yep.
So you can have it referencing multiple layers of BREX.
Mm-hmm.
One of the fallout ways of going through is simply going, I'll just use the S1000D bicycle BREX.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fallback of, if I don't have a Brex, at least I can reference to that one.
Because it is required, right? You have to, when you're
Absolutely.
developing a data module, you have to reference a Brex. So,
Absolutely.
So hence when people don't have one their customers demanding, and if they don't have one that they've developed themselves for their project, they point to the industry spec one, which doesn't really have a lot of rules in it, but it's one that you can point to. So
it is. Yeah. At least it gives you the starting point and
make sure documents are valid. Yeah.
Okay. So we need to have that conversation, and then from there, once we've actually gone through to do the conversion, you need to have some sort of verification of that conversion. How are you going to do that verification? Because, you know, your legacy data might be 5,000 pages long. Do you really want to go through and eyeball 5,000 pages of data and compare it?
Well, and the other thing is too, isn't it, when when programs are looking to actually convert to S1000D, often one of the reasons is they're wanting to deliver an IETP, an interactive tech pub, and so you may be going from, let's say, an example of a mill standard or a ATA 2200, 2,000-page manual. Very page-oriented, chapter, sections and book, and then all of a sudden you're going to be delivering to the customer for approval an IETP, which is in thousands of data modules. And so it's hard for you to verify that the content's correct and that everything's in it, and it's hard for them as well.
Correct.
And so that's, something that needs to be taken into account.
Absolutely. So you need to have some sort of verification process set in place to be able to do that comparison.
Yep.
So we'll have a little bit of a dig with that one.
Yep.
Okay, so with the analysis side of it, the first thing we need to do is we need to be able to identify what version of the spec, so what version of S1000D are we going to be using. Because when we start to look at the S1000D specification, depending on which version will determine what some of the criteria is, especially if you're looking at between issue 3 and below and issue 4 and above, because issue 3 and below, they had all this consistency of the element naming. Okay, so when we're going through the analysis side of it, the first thing we need to make the decision on is what version of the spec we're going to work with, because there's some really substantial differences between anything 3 and below and 4 and above. So we need to be able to identify that information. We need to make sure that we've got it clearly identified. Okay, so we need to have that information. So we need to know what's the version of the spec we're going to and what do we need to have to consider that version of the specification. As I said, we also need to have a really good range of that legacy data, because we want to be able to look at some of the simple documents, some of the more complicated documents, and a super complicated document, so that we can get a really good range of knowledge about what you're doing. So we need to do that. Then we also need to understand the structure of that legacy data. So with this, we need to understand, is it a structured or an unstructured data or document? And now, when we start to look at that, unstructured, if you automatically think of that wonderful program called Microsoft Word, that's an unstructured document. It's where you're putting everything in and you're applying styles to the content. And of course, everybody knows and loves the way that we can go into those styles and we can tweak them and we can make some slight modifications to it so that we can see those differences. So we need to understand what is the source data. So it could be that we've got a Word document, unstructured FrameMaker document, the joys of the PDF. We need to understand that. Whereas if you're currently already writing in a structured format, so that could be a structured FrameMaker file, a docbook, ATA, SGML, XML, we can have a little bit more of a flexible process with that because we already know the element names, so it could just be the mapping of the elements to element process between your current legacy data and S1000D. So we can have that sort of conversation. And then we need to start to identify what schemas are going to be used during that conversion. So as we all know, when we get into our S1000D environment, we start to have all these different schemas. So you've got descriptive, procedural, crew, wiring, schedule, IPD and such. So when we're looking at your data, we're also identifying what sort of content that is and how it can then fit into the S1000D environment. As we said, we need to have some sort of brex. So is it available or what's required to be used? So we need to have that conversation. And then we also need to have a methodology implemented to identify the SNS. So that's the standard numbering system. So when we look at the S1000D specification, it's got a range of criteria of how you're going to break your asset down. We need to have some method of being able to look at your existing data and how you name your publications and such to be able to do a one-for-one mapping process between what are you currently using compared to what you're going to.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to have that sort of information. So if we go into this, if we're looking at our unstructured documents, so think here straight away Word documents.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone loves Word, I'm sure.
Not.
So here what we need to do is we need to be able to identify the different styles. Now, if you've got a really good template controller, they can set up the templates and they lock you out. They just don't allow you to make any changes.
Mm-hmm.
That's the dream world because everybody knows they get into Word and it's, oh, Word's just not doing the numbering correctly, so you argue with the numbering, you move it slightly, you change it just that little bit.
You play with it manually.
You play with it manually just to get it to do exactly what you want it to do. So we've got to be able to identify that information and then also identify what we're going to do with it. And we've got to be able to have some sort of methodology and understanding of what we're going to do with those character overrides that we keep on playing with and tweaking just to get it to go into the right spot.
Mm.
So we've got to be able to identify all of that. So we want to be able to say, this style is going to become this in S1000D. So we start to do that mapping of information to say, this style, this element, or this attribute, this style becomes this. We go through and do that.
This override becomes this.
Absolutely. So once we've done that, or as we're doing that, we're also most probably manually building those sample data modules, because we want to be able to say, okay, if we go in and convert this, we know that this style is going to become this element, so let's literally put it into a data module and start to manually build it, because we want to verify that that analysis is working.
Yeah.
Okay? So then once we build this wonderful mapping document, that's what the developers are going to use. They're going to go in and do that programmatically to map. This style becomes this element, or this element becomes this element, depending on your source of content. So we then go through and we configure all of that and put it into the conversion engine. So it gives us that capability. Now you'll see when we go to a structured document, the thing we've got to do first of all, we're now in your structured world. So we've already got elements and attributes available. So we're now going to identify all of the elements that you're using currently. And again, we want to be able to map those across to your S1000D elements and attributes. So we can have that similar relationship between your current existing structured world moving across to S1000D. Again, we're still going to manually build those sample documents because we still want to verify if we do that mapping, does it work? Because we need to have the logic for it.
Mm.
Okay, and again, once we've done that mapping, then it's going to be built by the developers into the programmatic conversion engine. So you can see the last half of it really is similar. It doesn't matter if you're doing an unstructured or a structured document, we're going to end up with the same results. So that's what we're looking for when we start to go through this conversion process. And as I said, analysis, that's the core of what we're going to do. Now, when we start to look at this, we need to be able to identify your data module reference mapping. So as we can think about it, if you think of your existing documents, you may be producing a book, and that book might have 5 chapters. Those 5 chapters, when you start to look at the content, that could end up as 100 or 1,000 data modules, because we break the content down into much smaller chunks of information. So you're always going to have a lot more data modules than you do when you're thinking of a traditional book and chapter process. So we need to have that mapping, so we need to be able to identify the S&S process that we're going to use for that. And we also need to have an understanding of how you're going to handle the linking. So that's going to be both internal and external linking. So with this, we've got our internal linking, so that's where inside your data module you're talking about a particular graphic, table, additional power of information. What's the method of being able to identify that linking? And usually we can pick that information up inside the source data, because if they've been put into the source data correctly, we can then identify that information. So again, we can retrieve that information. The linking to external, there's two types of external documents that we're really talking about here. Firstly, external documents to other data modules, so external links to other data modules. So think of it in your existing documentation of referring from one chapter to another chapter. You're now going to do the reference from one data module to another data module, or you could be referencing off to a technical publication. So a tech pub is where we start to look at a PDF that's being supplied by an external contractor or a supplier. So you don't want to take over the responsibility of converting that, so you're going to reference off to it. So you still need to have that information identified. So again, we need to have that documented and know how we're going to put the markup in. Images, as we know, inside a Word environment, when you go and insert a picture, it gets embedded into the document. So therefore, when we go through the conversion process, we've got to be able to extract or be issued with those graphics as actual physical image formats. Mm-hmm. So first of all, we need to be able to find out how can we get the images. Are we going to extract them, or are we being issued with them? If we're extracting, what's the image format that we're going to use? Yes, inside the S1000D specification it says that the format should be CGM, but you need to make sure that you're producing a graphic format that's suitable for your delivery requirements. So again, back to your business rules of what do you need to deliver. Mm-hmm. So we need to have that information. We also need to be able to then make a decision as to how are we going to number this graphic. Inside S1000D, each graphic has its own ICN, and it's got a very detailed methodology of how you do that coding for the ICN. So again, we need to make a decision as to how that coding is going to be done so that it can be identified inside the conversion process. And again, linking and referencing to those images, how are we going to do it and what's our process for it? Now, as we all know, in the joys of the Word world, you can have duplicated content throughout the whole document, which inside our S1000D world, we want it once and only once. So when we're doing the conversion, do we need to have some sort of requirement to be able to identify that shared content? Mm-hmm. So again, is that inside the scope of what we're doing, or is it an exclusion of we're not going to monitor shared content? That's going to have to be a manual process after the event. So again, you go through that process of looking at the information.
Yeah, what's the end customer need? Yeah.
What's the end customer need? Now, with the later versions of S1000D, so version 3 all the way up to 4.2, they came out with this fantastic thing called CIRs, Common Information Repositories. Think of it as a data module that's a little mini database. So inside there you can have a list of all your warnings, a list of all your cautions, a list of all your tools, consumables, spare parts, zones. There's a range of these CIRs that are available. So the first thing we need to do is, do we need to have a methodology in that conversion process to develop the CIRs? And if we are, what are we building? Or again, is it an exclusion that would be done after the event? So again, we go through that process of analysing the content and really identifying what are we doing. So we need to have all of this knowledge base
before you start the conversion.
Absolutely. If you try and do it halfway through, it's going to be bad analysis.
You jumped a couple.
No, that was the one I was just on.
Oh, sorry, it clicked. Oh.
Okay. Now, when we go through and get to our bricks, in version 4.1 and 4.2 of the specification, S1000D has actually been really kind to us, and they've built this BRDPs. Yes, I'm sorry, it's another piece of jargon. BRDPs, Business Rules Decision Points. So they've always had these decision points inside the specification, but they were sort of buried into the actual text.
Yeah.
Unless you were reading everything, you didn't necessarily identify
all 3,500 pages. Yeah.
Yes, well, it's not like an easy PDF that you get to read. It's not riveting. So what they've done with version 4 and 4.1 is they've implemented BRDPs. And in version 4.1, there was around about 550 BRDPs. And in 4.2, they dropped about 60 to 80, but they added on about another 20 to 30. So they've still got around about the same sort of number. So what they've done is the specification has now said, if you can make the decisions for these BRDPs and have them documented, then you're going to have a pretty good coverage for your business rules and your bricks. Now, you're not just limited to the BRDPs that are listed inside the specification. You can also implement your own BRDPs. So once you've gone through and looked at all of the BRDPs that are listed inside the version of the specification you're looking at and working with, then you can develop your bricks based on those BRDPs. So it gives you that capability to build your bricks.
Talking to some of our consultants on site recently, someone sort of said, if you took a look at those 500 odd BRDPs that you've got detailed in your business rules, generally the kind of the top 100 are the sort of ones, the most important, top 100 are the ones that you'll want to start with when you develop your bricks, right?
Yeah, but how do you identify the top 100?
The top 100, I know, who makes that decision?
When you start to look at them.
Yeah, it's like, which ones are we culling these
what
down to?
What are the most important top 100, other than the fact that you're looking at what version of the spec? Well, you've already made that because you're looking at BRDP, so it's 4.1 or 4.2. Yeah. But then how do you really define the top 100 of the 552 BRDPs that are available in 4.1?
Yeah, I guess it's probably, the focus is probably more about which ones will definitely trip up writers or slow writers down as they're double checking themselves. Anything that will speed up the authoring validation or giving them feedback as they're authoring, and speed up QA, I guess, is probably the focus points. But like you said, I mean, all of it, right? You want all of it. So,
yeah, you still need to really review all of them before making a final decision saying, okay,
what's
these
important
are
in the
the most important ones. But yeah, you do need to have your breaks developed. So you've got to have some sort of breaks. Now, as I said, that could be that the customer goes, here's our breaks, this is what you're writing to.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it. And then you've got easy.
No decisions.
No decision is made. You've simply got to have some way of then being able to validate that.
Yep.
Okay, so we then get to our conversion testing process. So with this, we've got to run whatever is the conversion engine that we're using to convert that legacy data to S1000D.
Yep.
So with this, we then need to have some sort of method to be able to view any error logs.
Yep. Because
you can't just do a conversion without an error log.
Yep. Because there will be things that fall out. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you've got to keep enhancing. And of course, there'll be those random things in some publications that just pop up.
Look at it and go, okay, here we go again.
Yeah.
So you're going to have that constant cycle of analysis, conversion, update it, and select it.
So someone just asked the question there, Rita, that, are the BRDPs based on the customer requirements? Obviously, that's the focus. Yep. And even better if the customer can actually hand you those business rules decision points. Correct. And remembering that from your Brex side of it, for Brex validation, you really want to focus on the authoring requirements. So that's where the Brex really has its power, because you can do a Brex validation against
the content that's been written. So it's all well and good to put in some decisions about, the delivery requirements and such, but you really want to have the validation against the actual content. So you start to focus very much on the author's requirements for the delivery to the customer.
Just makes their life easier actually and faster. Yeah.
Okay. So once we've reviewed the content, then what we need to do is we need to be able to then have some methodology to validate that converted content. So we need to be able to validate it against the schema and the bricks.
Yep.
So you need some sort of tools that allow you to do that validation process.
And of course, a good conversion engine will be doing that. It will, part of that process will be as it converts, there'll be some errors, and then it will actually be validating against the schema and Brex in that process as well.
Absolutely.
So you should end up at that point that your error log should cover all those things. Just basically styles that might have come up that have never been mapped, and then for some reason structurally it didn't end up valid against the schema. So why not? Maybe we haven't basically mapped all the elements correctly or required attributes or
correct,
and then of course the Brex validation. So.
Absolutely. So we've got to go through that process and have that validation.
Make sure the conversion engine is outputting all those things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Then you've got to go through your QA validation. So this is where someone is really going to check the content.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to check the error logs. They're really going to sit down and analyse and review those error logs and see, did anything occur? Did something pop out that they've gone, oh, that shouldn't have happened?
Yep.
What is it? Why is it?
Is it the conversion engine? Is it something new that's in the documents that hasn't been found before?
You've got to go through that process.
Yeah.
Then really what you've got to do is then add those data modules and those ICNs into a CSDB, a common source database.
Yep.
Because what we can do then is inside the CSDB, we can use, such as in the R4I system, we can use our references window, and it will then verify, do we have all of the linking happening? So do we have all of the ICNs there? Or does it say, hey, we've got a missing ICN or group of ICNs?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have missing data module codes? So
that's right, because a data module can be valid, referencing another data module and an image, but you won't know if that's in the set, right, until you put it into a CSDB and it'll tell you what you're missing. Yeah.
So, again, we need to go through that process to ensure that we've got all of the data covered. And, again, what we can do is then use, such as R4I Writer, we can open and correct any of the documents that have failed.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, it allows us to view that content and identify what's happening. So once we've been able to do that, we now know, okay, the documents are valid, we've got all of the content, everything's there, we have all of it. You can then physically go through to the publish process, and that then means that you can then do a final delivery to your customer. Okay, so we've just had one person who's popped in late, so that's okay. They've come up with a question of what's an ICN. Okay, so an ICN is the image code, so it's an illustration control number. So that ICN is used by S1000D for your graphics and multimedia information. So anything that's not a textual piece of information becomes an ICN.
And one of the things we mentioned at the start is there is a lot of acronyms in this particular topic because, we're bringing up a lot of core S1000 details. So if there's anything in the presentation, codes like, what's a CIR, what's a Brex, what's an ICN, we've run webinars on these topics before over the last 5 years. So feel free to jump up onto the website and there's a list of past S1000D topics that we've run, and feel free to request a viewing of any of those recordings.
Yep. So now that we've got to that point, what I wanted to do was just show a couple little pieces of a conversion capability. So the two that I thought I'd show was converting S1000D issue 2/3 to 4.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just where we're going. And
so going from a markup language, and whether it's ATA mill standard or another S1000D to,
it doesn't matter.
Yep.
We're going from one structured version
to another structured
version.
Yep.
And the other one that I wanted to have a little bit of a play with was actually moving from a mill standard, so it's also a structured world, but it was a FrameMaker structured world, and we're going to convert that to S1000D. So they were the two that I thought might help with just being able to understand what's involved. So let's just jump down. So these are the two tools that I'm going to work with. So the first one, oh, not that one. I want that one. IPD Manager's not going to help me with this. It does it, but it's slightly different. So Data Module Exchanger was a tool that we've created that allows you to be able to look at your existing S1000D content and convert it to a different version of the specification. And we really looked at it and went, okay, if you're going to convert from an older version.
So like 3 and below, because they were all that same sort of naming conventions.
Up to version 4 and above. So at the moment, I've got mine set so that it's going to convert to version 4.0.
So you're going from a 3, are you? So you're going from a 3 to a 4. Okay.
Okay, and part of this is we have a range of different settings that we need to go through. So first of all, we need to set all of our source locations. So where's our source, where's our output, if we've got anything that's invalid, where does it go to, and once we've processed it, where does it go to, so that's all fine. But then inside S1000D, they've got this block at the top of a data module that's called your identification and status block. And every single data module has it. No matter what you're doing, it's going to be there.
It's compulsory to have it.
It's compulsory. So what we did was we gave them the interface to be able to set some of that criteria. So we've got our issue date, issue number, in work, quality assurance and security, and then your originator and your RPC. RPC, in case no one has notified it, is your responsible partner company. Okay, so we've gone through and we've added these controls into your content. So once we've done that, so here's my files that I want to be able to process through and manage that information. So all I've got to do is simply click onto the run, and it'll come up with my run settings. So again, I can verify my identification status.
Before you kick it off.
Okay, and then I can put in an RFU, so a reason for update.
And this is all important, right? I mean, I'll let you kick it off, but
absolutely. And I just click run, and what it's doing is it's physically going through the process of converting this data module. Remember, it's a snippet of information. It's a self-contained piece of data about a process. So, anything that's involved with doing a particular set of instructions, that's a data module.
A remove procedure, a replace procedure, that's a data module.
That's a data module. Okay, so you can see here that it's gone through and it's generated all of that content, so it's processed everything, and it's got little green ticks all the way through. And if I come into my testing, you'll see here, so here was my source folder, and it's now empty. If I go into my V4 folder, you can see I've used my Bike 3 content, because remember, all of us love the joys of the bicycle samples. They're just so much fun. But what we've done is, if I just go into my process folder, and if I open up a data module, so I'm going to keep that one open for the moment, and I'll go back to my V4 folder, and I'll open up exactly the same file. So what we can do is we can see between the two differences that it's converted the information. So the first thing is it's identified the namespace information here, whereas on this version here you can see that it's for V3. But the big change between it is in the V3, here's our data module code, and it's all child elements. Whereas in V4, what they did was, with the version 4 S1000D specification, was anything that could be programmatically read by a computer system, they changed it from being an element to an attribute. So we can see there that the DMC, the data module code, is now attributes of the element DM code, whereas previously it was child elements.
Quite attribute intensive, isn't it? 4.0 compared to the 3 series. So
absolutely. So what they did was anything that they deemed that it was a computer programmable controlled file information, they moved it to an attribute.
Yeah.
That's the best description you can put against that information. So again, it allows us to be able to identify that. So we can see that that content has been successfully transformed, and then what you would do is you would check it into your CSDB, make sure you've got all the content, all the references.
Still the usual process that we've recommended.
And then at some point in time, you've then got to do your validation.
So
it's a really simple process. You know, it doesn't do...
from a, once the, and as you said, fundamental analysis, because the analysis is working out, getting all those questions answered.
Absolutely.
Where are we chunking? What's the numbering? What's the, are we worrying about CIRs? Are we monitoring for, common content, or shared content? All those things, all those decisions have to be made during the analysis process, or hopefully even before, but I guess, some of it they might not decide until you dig into the analysis or find other things. Correct. But then it's getting it mapped in the conversion engine so that you get as much automation as possible, right?
Absolutely.
Now, someone's asked the question, of course, if it's a PDF, how do you do it? Now, we have a partner who does have a engine,
correct,
a conversion engine that does do PDF conversion quite well. But some people will choose to, well, it depends too. Is the PDF a scanned document?
You've got to look.
Scan.
So that it becomes an image, not actual text.
If
it's that, then
you're manually converting.
If it's textual PDF, then you've really got a couple of choices with it. You can have information so that you can just go file, save as, and save it out as an RTF file, and then do
potentially something from there.
Something from there. Or you can go through the process of using an actual engine to do that conversion. So again, it really does depend on what you've got.
And one of our business partners does actually have a PDF engine that they use for part of their conversion, and so we'd be happy to recommend, if there's a lot of data, you'd want to go the automated as much as possible.
Absolutely. And again, you've really got to consider what is that PDF, because if it's a scanned image, there's very little you can do with it.
It's going to be
manual. It doesn't matter what you do with a conversion engine, because it's not
can't pick up anything. It's an image.
It's an image. There's nothing else you can do with it. So it really is.
You're typing. You're typing.
Learn to touch type.
That's right. I'll get a crew on board that can.
Learn to do touch typing so that you can get that information documented.
Put them through an S1000D authoring course.
That's really what you've got. Now, the other conversion that we looked at, and I thought might be beneficial, this is some content that we have used. It's a mill standard or a mill spec information or process. So it's a structured FrameMaker file. And with this, so if you've ever played with FrameMaker, you'll start to recognise some of the terminology that's here. So with this, what we did was we made some small updates to the engine inside FrameMaker so that we could save this content out as XML, and it then gave us this information here. So this is this naming convention. It's all proprietary to...
It's how Frame outputs their books by default.
Frame. It's got nothing to do with what we're doing. This is what Frame will output. But what it does is it gives us this XML file. So again, we went through this analysis process and we started to look at what we could do with that content. So again, remember back to the conversation of the S&S process. We need to have some sort of method of being able to manage the S&S. So for this particular conversion, what we did was we made it a function that the customer could manage this information. So with this, they had their document name, and we then went through and said, okay, so what's going to be the model identification code? So again, we're looking at the information of what's available and following the S1000D specification.
And quite often, don't they, people with legacy publications
will have this.
They'll want to use the the core of the numbering that's been in the publications, they want to put it into the data module coding or the SNS coding.
Absolutely.
And it does make people very comfortable because they go, oh, so this is from this publication, because they see the front of the numbers, and then it's this chapter, you know, et cetera, in that publication.
So we set it up so they put in their model identification and their system difference code. So that then made up the publication for them.
Yeah, coding.
So it really did make it quite easy for them. Once they've done that, and because they weren't sure on the total number of publications, instead of having it coded into the software, we gave them this interface so they could simply click new and add in new ones as they went through. So with that, they also had a requirement of setting it to so they could have a concept for a book size.
And also I think in the background the subtlety of
the chunking.
Yeah, the chunking was different if it was an A5 or an A4, yeah, where they wanted it chunked or burst.
So for this one I'm just going to set it to A4.
Yeah.
And all we needed to do with this was simply point to the XML file.
So that's the book output file from Frame.
So that's this file here that I'm grabbing. And all I do is then just go open, and the process then goes through to convert. So what it does, you'll now see, is it's now created a subfolder. And inside that subfolder, each of the chapters were then broken down into their own individual
because we had a book file which was the XML, and then it had these entities which was all the chapters.
Correct. So it gave us that ability to be able to burst the content at the appropriate place to get this content.
And ironically, like because if we look at the, you know, we've got the publication folder and then the chapter folders and then all the data modules in those chapter folders, ironically people go, that's perfect, and they import that book directly with all its subfolders and all the data modules into the CSDB, right?
Correct.
And they kind of have that logic of, right, that book's being converted and these are all the pieces, and now, like you said, they'll do the validation of, are all the links, the images, everything there.
Okay, so so we can have that. You can see here that it's been generated for each chapter. So again, we can see all of those individual chapters into one publication. So depending on the size of the publication, depending on the size of the chapter, depending on during the analysis where do we chunk, will determine how much content we end up in that output. So it gives you that ability to be able to identify the information and then just run the process. And so this one was a really simple process. Okay, the analysis took the core of
and a lot of publications.
Lots of publications, lots of testing criteria for it. But it helped then that once we've done that,
interface was very easy to use.
The interface was really quite simple. So that's what you can do with some sort of conversion process.
Or automated conversion,
Okay, so so that's the sort of information you need to consider when you're doing a conversion. I'll leave that slide up. The next slide is actually our question slide. So if you've got any questions or queries and you want to come back to us, you can connect with Tammy or myself via our email addresses. And then once we've gone through that, then we'll happily help anybody out. If you do have a question that doesn't necessarily follow through with the actual conversion process that we've been documenting, certainly connect with us directly and we will help you out. And then from there, what we'll be able to do is direct you to some resources that are available so that you can understand what's involved. Okay, so we'll go through that process, but certainly jump up onto the OneStrand website or even the ADG website and you'll see all of our
past webinars.
And that will certainly assist with understanding how this all fits together and what's involved with it.
Now, as you exit today, folks, there will be a short survey that just asks what you thought of the webinar. Was it educational? And is there any other topic that you'd like to see covered specifically? If you could provide that feedback, that would be wonderful. And as a thank you for providing that feedback, Samantha will make sure that you get a copy of this recording or a link to this recording within the next 48 hours so that if you want to go over the detail again or if you'd like to share that with a colleague, you're able to do so. So thank you all for attending with us today, whether you're joining us from over in the US somewhere late afternoon, evening, or from Australia and New Zealand region this morning. And next month's topic is
graphics.
Graphics, yes, it's a graphical topic. The details for that webinar are already on our website, and that will be our last one for the year of 2017.
I can't believe we're just saying that.
I know, can you believe that? So, yes, we look forward to seeing you all in the next session as well. So thank you all for attending. It doesn't look like we've got any other questions regarding the conversion here at this point in time, Rita. So we'll let everyone run off to the rest of their day, and we look forward to seeing everyone in the next session. Thank you.